I did want to talk about more pressing political issues, but now I need to respond to a series of hit pieces because I take a week off from making videos and suddenly the Telegraph, the Daily Mail, the Spectator, Guido Fawkes and other outlets decide I'm really important. The first piece has decided to try to pressure the website Buy Me a Coffee into deplatforming people that the Telegraph doesn't like. Now, for context, the Telegraph has been newly acquired by a German liberal news conglomerate who own Politico, Bild, Welt, and who seem to have one of their primary issues not be the demographic security of the West. Their interests lie elsewhere. And they decided to contact Buy Me a Coffee and try to get them to deplatform me, as well as Lucy White and Steve Laws. Now, those who have followed my work for some time know that there's some differences of opinion between myself and Steve. So lumping us into the same article isn't good faith. And what's happened here is they are trying to use implication and insinuation and smears, frankly. And they know they're doing it because, as we'll get onto in a moment, I responded to their request for comment refuting their charges and they didn't print my comment and printed the erroneous summary of me anyway. They're trying to use all of this to attack my livelihood when I've got 2 children on the way. This is disgusting. It's pathetic, actually. As far as I know, at time of recording and publishing, the Buy Me a Coffee page is still available. It's just been linked below in all of my YouTube videos. And the reason I even set it up in the first place is because I got a couple of messages from people on Substack saying, hey, I'm subscribed to your Substack, which you should, by the way, because you get additional content. But I want to support your work just because I like it. How do I send? And I didn't have any other revenue streams because I just hadn't thought about it. So I just set up a page to allow people to donate and give me some tips. And there has been a minor Streisand effect happening in this where some people have gone over and said, you know, chin up, here's a $5 to keep you going while the page is still live. But the intention in this article is to get me banned from places where I can earn an income talking about topics that these people don't like. But first, this video is sponsored by Gold Bullion Partners. Use my affiliate link down in the description if you want to book your free consultation to invest in gold or silver. Gold Bullion Partners investments are exempt from CGT and VAT tax and are eligible for self-investment pension plan. They offer secure, allocated and segregated storage in London and Zurich, including for my American viewers and for my viewers, they give you preferential storage if you use the affiliate link down in the description. Nice touch. Gold Bullion offers wholesale access to both supply and pricing, and they offer all customers a buyback guarantee. And for those of you who want all of my content ad-free going forwards, subscribe to my Substack for as little as £5 per month. That's also linked down in the description below. What can I say? I've got twins on the way and more mouths to feed. And so, the article is headlined, Far-Right Extremists Exploiting Buy Me a Coffee Fundraising App. Exploiting. Translation, using the service as intended. Because I'm not doing anything illegal. I am just saying things that the authors of this piece do not like. And I think this is actually mainly a partisan attack because Gordon Rayner previously wrote pieces saying that Restore Britain is funded by white supremacists, and what he means is that like Steve Laws and Lord Miles paid a membership fee. Okay, anyone can join a political party in Britain. Very few political parties audit their membership, aside from parties who have exiled some of their more high-profile members for criticising them. Again, I remind you, I'm banned from both the Conservatives and Reform as things stand. So, hey, maybe I'm just a rambunctious troublemaker. And nevertheless, they've lumped me in here, I think, to attack Restore Britain. And it's like, well, sorry, but I'm not one of their canvassers. I'm not, like, making decisions or anything. So, this is just a bad faith attack, a proxy war on Restore Britain, trying to force me to lose my livelihood. I mean, what next? Are they going to complain that I'm monetized on YouTube? I mean, probably. Reminder, again, the Telegraph is meant to be the right-wing newspaper in Britain. It seems to just be an attack dog of the establishment. And I might suggest as well that this will backfire spectacularly, because if pretty much every outlet is attacking someone like Restore Britain on the same terms, like The Guardian and The Telegraph are publishing almost identical articles in terms of sentiment, like this article basically belongs in The Guardian, then it makes someone like Restore Britain and Rupert Lowe look like the only option that isn't approved of by the establishment, and the establishment that's let us down time and time again. I mean, reminder, you know, the Daily Mail has been attacking Restore Britain, and it publishes Boris Johnson, who is responsible for the Boris wave. So it's not a good look for these outlets to do this, and it's especially not a good look when the smears themselves are disingenuous. So they attack Steve Laws, they attack Lucy White, they didn't actually ask her for comment, and then they actually ran her comment eventually. She's defended her views, saying, "The mass deportation of third world migrants is not extreme. Becoming a minority in the country of your ancestors is extreme. I'm advocating for return to normality. None of this is normal." I mean, nothing objectionable in that. Telegraph think that's objectionable, though. So they wrote here about me. Another Buy Me a Coffee fundraiser. Well, I've got a page. I'm not really fundraising for anything, but thanks to all of those that donate and help me pay my mortgage, I suppose. Connor Tomlinson, a Restore-linked activist and proponent of the large swap conspiracy theory. Now, I have to euphemize that, because if I say that out loud, YouTube will flag and ban the video. It happened before when I covered what the large swap conspiracy theory actually is. They decided to take the video down and give the Lotus Eaters a 7-day suspension. Now, they are referencing here a post by Hope Not Hate, following my interview with Liz Truss, where they headline the hit piece on me with me being a proponent of the large swap conspiracy theory, which the Telegraph describe as it posits that shadowy elites are using African and Asian immigrants to subvert Western society. They also add, he has also previously endorsed a ban on circumcision. What an odd thing to say. For the record, yeah, I support banning all child genital mutilation, because it's a purely cosmetic, non-medically necessary procedure that causes infants severe pain. And it's just not what we do here. Like, fine, adults, whatever, you can't really stop them getting harmful cosmetic surgeries. But, just as I'm against FGM, I'm against circumcision. That's a perfectly reasonable position to have. But of course, those two sentences are paired together in order to accuse me of conspiratorial antisemitism. Now, it is conspicuous that they decided to do this, because that was also the charge that Hope Not Hate levelled at me. And in DMs, one of the authors of this piece, Patrick Sawyer, summarised that they were going to describe me as such. They didn't list all of the quotes, essentially my greatest hits that they printed in the article that I'll read out in a moment, to me. Nevertheless, I stand by all of them. But he said, "Hi, Mr. Tomlinson. I'm writing about Buy Me a Coffee being used by far-right activists such as yourself," I'm not a far-right activist, "to raise funds for campaigning. In my story, I'll be making the following points. Connor Tomlinson, a Restore-linked activist and proponent of the large swap conspiracy theory that shadowy elites are using African and Asian migration to subvert Western society. Mr. Tomlinson's account has dozens of supporters and an unknown number of monthly subscribers who pay him £4 a month." I don't know if there's like a minimum donation thing. This is the thing, I don't even know how this website works. I just set it up and leave it idle. On his page, Mr. Tomlinson describes himself as a reactionary Catholic Zoomer, and it states, "Without your generosity, I wouldn't be able to lend my voice to the fight against the existential threats posed to our civilization." True, and thank you all for that. If you have a comment regarding the above and your use of Buy Me a Coffee, I'd be happy to consider them for inclusion in my piece. Okay, so I responded basically immediately, saying, "Hi Patrick, curious to know where you got that description of me. Sounds a lot like that originally written by Hope Not Hate, who have attempted to smear me because I've reported on the violent and criminal behaviour of their members." I attached the tweet that Hope Not Hate were quoting from, that they decided to redact a large body from when they quoted it in the article. The large swap theory isn't a white supremacist anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. I've read the English translation of Renaud Camus' essays by Vauban Books. It's real. It's the blank slate theory applied to borders. It's why we have pro-Hamas marches in Westminster. So they took the "it's real" and the "large swap isn't a white supremacist anti-Semitic conspiracy theory" quote, and just sandwiched them together, omitting the context from the video. And the context is important because, as I said in this response, as you can see, I don't think it's a shadowy conspiracy, neither does the man who coined the term, Renaud Camus. I was reading from Camus' original essay, where he used the term to describe the effect on culture and the threat posed to the Jewish audience he was speaking to and to gay men like himself by importing alien cultures through culture-blind immigration policy. For more on this, I wrote a digestible Substack piece last year, and I actually provided a screenshot and the link to the piece. Here's a quote from the 2010 essay coining the phrase large swap. One hesitates to identify interest as the principal motor of replacist ideology and its lies, for one cannot fail to also take into consideration all of the groups that nobly support, promote and diffuse these deceitful dogmas against their own interest, often of the most immediate kind, and who are sometimes just beginning to regret it, i.e., Jews, women, homosexuals, secularists, champions of free thought and free expression, all cheerfully busy soaring off the branches on which they sit alongside the heralds of diversity, who themselves do not perceive they are in fact only making more of the same, always more of the same, the undifferentiated universal village, or rather the generalized suburb, the place where Ilan Halimi crawls in his final hour, violent, wild, deculturated and decivilized. Okay, Camus was talking to the Parisian Jewish Forum about why they shouldn't support more migration, because it's going to import anti-Semitism from the Muslim world, it's going to import anti-feminism and illiberalism from the Muslim world, and so they're going to soar off the branch on which they sit by calling for more diversity and ending up with the exact kind of sentiment that led to the Holocaust. Does that sound like an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory to you? No, obviously not. Does Camus mentioning Ilan Halimi sound like an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory? For those who don't know, Halimi was a French citizen of Moroccan and Jewish ancestry. He was kidnapped on the 21st of January 2006 by a group called the Gang of Barbarians. They were led by an Ivory Coast national, Youssouf Fofana. They encouraged a 17-year-old French-Iranian girl to act as a honeypot to lure Halimi into an ambush. He was then gagged, bound, and ransomed for 450,000 euros. Halimi was held for 24 days, tortured, had 80% of his body burned before being dumped, mostly naked, beside a road on Saint Genevieve de Bois on the 13th of February 2006. A passerby tried to call an ambulance, but Halimi died from his traumatic wounds on the way to the hospital. Does Camus mentioning Halimi's murder as an atrocity he wants to prevent sound like an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory? No. When Camus repeated the term to the France-Israel Association in 2012, he said, "What I call the large swap is the change of people, the substitution of one or several peoples for the people whose ancestral roots are there, whose history had for hundreds or thousands of years coincided with the territory in question. I might, speaking as I am before the France-Israel Association, appeal to an example that should convey my meaning. The large swap is what would happen to Israel if, God forbid, we were to accede to the Palestinian demand for the so-called right of return. Under such conditions, could Israel remain a Jewish state, as one says?" So Camus used the mass population exchange of Palestinians into Israel and the effect that that would have on their culture, their demographic security, and the levels of terror and anti-Semitism as an example for why the large swap is an undesirable fate. And the large swap is just ignoring culture when conducting immigration policy. So does it sound like an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory to you? No. I provided this all to the journalist who wrote this article and asked me for comment, and as you can see in the original version, oh how weird, the only comment they included was, in response to the Telegraph, Mr. Tomlinson rejected criticisms of his views as smears. They were, but you decided not to include my comment, and you still went with the duplicitous framing of how I had previously spoken about the Great Swap conspiracy theory. Anyway, now, in an updated version, they included my comment saying, Tomlinson defended his position on the large swap theory, stating, "I don't think it's a shadowy conspiracy, neither does the man who coined the term, Renaud Camus." I was reading from Camus' original essay, where he used the term to describe the effect on culture and the threat posed to the Jewish audience he was speaking to and gay men like himself by importing alien cultures through culture-blind immigration policy. Okay, thank you for including that, but it still contains the erroneous version of the large swap theory. My comments are buried at the bottom. I'm still called a far-right extremist, and the purpose of this article is to get me deplatformed. And it went out, and many people read it, before the comment was attached and no correction was attached. And you know the purpose of this article is to get me deplatformed, because they spoke to Alex Hearn, the co-director of Labour Against Anti-Semitism. Right, so a completely partisan outfit who is principally concerned with anti-Semitism, thereby implying that everyone in this article is an anti-Semite because they open with Steve Laws, who said he would deport Andrew Gold back to Israel, which again makes Steve Laws a Zionist because you need an Israel to deport him to. Nevertheless, I'm included in this article to insinuate that I'm a conspiratorial anti-Semite, therefore I should be banned from buying me a coffee, therefore I shouldn't be able to make a livelihood talking about politics. Now, again, I've had some friends of mine who are Jewish. I'm in politics, shock, it happens, who read this article and were like, what the hell are they doing? This is shameful. I also had plenty of non-Jewish friends say the same thing. Because I'm not actually some wild-eyed ideological radical. I just want my children to enjoy the same demographic security in their own country as Jewish children do in Israel. That's a completely reasonable expectation. But instead, the Telegraph decided to pull up a list of my tweets. For example, on social media, he said there should be no legitimate ways for Iraqis, Sudanese, Iranians and Afghans to come to Britain. We're full, too many crimes, costs too much, no more, no thanks, millions must leave. They think that's objectionable. Who do you think's committing the terror attacks against Jews, you fucking idiots? They're doing the same to us. Another adds, you can only see so many images of atrocities where the victims are white and the perpetrators are foreign before concluding that we aren't basically all the same and cannot peacefully coexist. Third world migration must be reversed. Absolutely true. Yeah. Lots of third worlders hate white people for the sins of colonialism because they're not part of their ethnic in-group, because they're Islamic radicals and they would like to ensure that the entirety of Britain becomes a caliphate, and, shock, they don't even like Israel very much. So, chap who wrote this piece, who ignored my comment, Patrick Sawyer, and by the way, the tick is there. It was there at the time before the piece was published, so he did see it, he just decided not to include it. Patrick Sawyer writes frequently about anti-Semitism in Israel, so it's one of his principal concerns. It is also one of the principal concerns of the new buyer of the Telegraph. That's why they inserted the comment about circumcision in there. Because it's meant to be a wink-wink, nod-nod, oh, this guy hates Jews and he should be banned from earning a livelihood. And I would just suggest, as I did to Patrick, saying, you read and you didn't print my response, you decided to lie about my views, very dishonourable, Patrick. After he got a significant amount of backlash on social media, he's locked his account, by the way. Thanks, Connor. I asked for some of your comments to be added, re the large swap. And I said, we both know that should have been done before the article was printed, before it was presented to the spokespeople for Buy Me a Coffee for comment, because you misrepresented my views to the people at Buy Me a Coffee, who responded, in the article, by the way, that it does not allow anything that promotes or glorifies harm, whether physical, emotional, or psychological. That includes extremist ideologies or the promotion of violence, and content that promotes hate or violence based on race, ethnicity, religion, or gender, and specifically bans political fundraising or campaign donations, which I'm not engaging in. And told the Telegraph, we appreciate you bringing this to our attention. We have forwarded the information you provided to our relevant team for review. They will investigate the matter from our end and take any necessary action in accordance with our policies. So, they responded to a misrepresentation of my views, designed to get me banned from the platform and take away one of my revenue streams. And they knew they were doing that because they read my response, they didn't change the framing, they only added it after they approached Buy Me a Coffee and Labour Against Anti-Semitism, a left-wing partisan outlet. They only added my comments and didn't change the framing after the damage has already been done. After they've tried to deprive me of one of my revenue streams that allows me to pay for my mortgage with twins on the way. So I responded, saying, credibility is a currency, and misrepresenting people like this, particularly to target their livelihood, will spend it very quickly. And it's important because the comments below the article were siding, essentially, with me and the other people targeted, even if they don't agree with everyone's views. They were saying, what the hell is this doing in the Telegraph? Don't you have more important things to report on than someone getting tips for making YouTube videos about immigration? And this could have been printed in The Guardian or The Daily Mirror. This is gutter journalism trying to ruin people's lives because of a perceived disagreement about, what, Israel? Immigration? Again, none of the things that I said in here are extreme or violent. In response to a debate on LBC over deportations, I wrote, they have no arguments against mass deportations. You can send millions of people home, whether they have the proper paperwork provided by a treacherous state or not. They can only insist you can't, to which the response is, we can, we will, we must. Right, so you're in favour of loads of violent immigrants staying in our country, terraforming our culture, against the wishes of the host population and the Telegraph readers, are you? Interesting position to take. And then they said, in a post about Henry Novak's killing, he wrote, I'm a single-issue voter at this point. Immigration from India must end and be reversed. Yeah, if the killer hadn't been brought into the country, Henry Novak would still be alive. Did you want Henry Novak's killers brought into the country? Did you want the rapists that come from India brought into the country? Like, is that your position? Because if that's the case, then you're utterly reprehensible. And having your disapproval is an endorsement. But it's still a really dirty tactic to try and create a whisper campaign to try and destroy my livelihood. But that wasn't it, because I got up on Thursday morning and assessed the state of political parties after the Makerfield by-election, where Restore underperformed relative to what they could have got, but they still got in line with the Survation polling at about 6.87%. Reform underperformed relative to what they could have got. I mean, they could have won it, though it would have been very difficult, given Andy Burnham's popularity. But also, the by-election wasn't a barometer for the national mood, because Labour are still despised, even if Burnham might give them a brief poll bounce before he makes contact with Whitehall and realises that he has to own all their failings and can't get anything done. Nevertheless, I assess the state of the parties from a rhetorical and personnel standpoint. So, I put out a very long post saying that the window for Restore Britain to win a handful of seats at the next general election is closing if they continue to make errors, as Rupert did, saying that he's in favour of a multicultural society so long as people integrate. I know that he misspoke, but it's an avoidable error you just didn't need to make. And the moment you make those errors, you sow doubt among your own base, you slow down your momentum, and people within the base start turning on each other, and it causes your base to have to explain yourself to your base. And Reform face the same problem, because Reform have recognised that they underperformed at the by-election. They've recognised that even though they are top of the polls, they've stagnated or subsided somewhat. They recognise that if Restore Britain gets anything above 3%, then it could cost them a national majority, and that Restore didn't need to exist if they hadn't have expelled Rupert Lowe in the way that they did, and alienated quite a lot of young talent, and canvassers and supporters, by disavowing things like ethno-nationalism and the far right, and the Unite the Kingdom marchers. And so now Reform has started to take their criticisms on board, and change their rhetoric and policy to be more representative of the British people. To say that, yeah, we're an institutionally anti-white state. Basically, Nigel Farage wants to look like he's taking our side. And that's a smart political move. The problem they have is they have a credibility deficit, because anyone can just put a clip of you saying one thing and then a clip of you saying another side by side, and so people don't know what to believe. And because, despite the differing character of the Tory defectors, Suella Braverman's a nice woman, Robert Jenrick, there are questions about his immigration record and why he's being played out of position as a lawyer to then be the Treasury spokesperson, and then Nadim Zahawi, just reprehensible human being, like, seems financially dubious, wanted a mass amnesty of illegal migrants, supported bringing in more Somalians so they could send money home in remittances, pushed vaccine passports as vaccine minister, was a Boris Johnson cabinet minister, seems unrepentant for the Boris wave, all of these problems. When you've got those Tory defectors in, it seems difficult to persuade people in the Red Wall that you aren't just a recycling bin for failed Tory ministers. And this is something that Reform has to recover from, and this is their issue to deal with. Again, I remain a critical friend to all parties. And in the spirit of critical friendship, I put all of these things in a post that I just wrote when I was having a coffee on my sofa, waiting for my pregnant wife to get out of bed so we could go in an air-conditioned Uber to Arc, because, again, we were melting to death during that heatwave. It's one of the reasons why I didn't make some videos. And, as I said, look, some of the senior figures of Reform come across as inauthentic. Their vibe is basically poisonous to anyone under 30. Nobody wants to be in an episode of Heidi High or Surprise Surprise. Their messaging is inconsistent. But, I will say, I had people in Reform reach out after this post and say, your criticisms are valid, and we're listening. So, I appreciate it. I would like to maintain a position relative to political parties that's similar to David Starkey's, where I can be a critical friend to my actual friends in both parties, and encourage them to adopt necessary policies, sweep minds for them rhetorically so they can occupy firmer rhetorical ground, and offer some gentle corrections, occasionally firm corrections, when they say silly things, such as Danny Kruger's interview on the New Culture Forum, which I did a 2-hour autistic breakdown of, and I'm sure Danny didn't appreciate it, but nevertheless, I hope it's constructive. Anyway, I put this long post out, and in it, I pointed out that Restore Britain has made some poor personnel choices, like Scott Benton, some poor candidate choices, like Rebecca Shepherd, and the relatively weak candidate compared to Reform's candidate for this obscure Norfolk Police and Crime Commissioner election. And they're running in the Manchester mayoral election, and granted, I think that Marlon West is a good guy and actually a stronger candidate than the woman that Reform have put up. However, I don't think Restore should be running in all these races, because they're in constant campaign mode, and there is a tendency for Restore's leadership, not my friends Harrison, Charlie and Lewis, to focus on one thing at a time. And that causes things like the Rape Gang Inquiry or some policy papers to be rushed out, others haven't even been published yet, so you haven't got a full policy prospectus. It causes some incongruity in the message and rhetoric between Rupert's account and Rupert himself, and then the young lads like Charlie Harrison and Lewis, which needs to be resolved. And this causes a loss of confidence among some of its members. So these are all issues they need to fix. And they need to fix this by having some more formal party infrastructure. They need to upgrade their website. You don't even know who the party officials are on the website because there isn't a page for it. There isn't a page or a portal for you to make contact with your specific branch. You just have to wait for an email telling you which branch you're a part of. And each person doesn't have a defined remit with a linear chain of command straight to the top, straight to Rupert. For example, you'll have people answering emails about branches who are meant to be working on policy or FOIs or messaging. So you need an expansion of the team, more clarity on who's doing what, and a more direct chain of command to Rupert himself. You can't just have it be bottlenecked through one person. And they also need to make more prudent decisions about their candidates and which elections to stand in, especially ahead of a general election, where, as things stand, they have no hope of winning a national majority. And it might be prudent to target constituencies where they are more likely to win. And, as I said in this post, serve their function essentially as a pressure campaign, because they were conceived of as a pressure campaign. I was at the meeting with the lads, and they've already achieved many of their goals, forcing reform rightward on immigration and rhetoric, mainstreaming conversations about repealing things like the Race Relations Act or the Public Order Act, ensuring that the idea of a great repeal bill and a subsequent restoration of our constitutional sovereignty is top of the agenda. And as well, the mass deportations coalitions out in America modelled their handbook on Harrison Pitt's mass deportations document for Restore Britain, which, of course, Reform now admits they took ideas from. So, look, Restore Britain has been a success so far, and they've been a success in part because they converted to a political party and put actual substantive pressure on reform. You know, Isabel Oakeshott on Talk today, remember Richard Tice's fiancée, talking to Jeremy Kyle, who provides media training to reform candidates, saying that reform's doing some soul-searching and they're wondering why they're not winning by elections and they're not successful. And part of it is because they left their rightward flank open and now Restore occupy it. And now they've got to make up for their lost credibility. They've got to have stronger messaging, better policy, and I can already see that Zia Youssef and Nigel Farage understand this. And what they've also got to do as well is ensure that some of their surrogates aren't as vitriolic as they are. Like, it is quite off-putting to have, let's say, second-tier reform supporters, some of whom I've met and get along with, some of whom I don't, just go on the timeline and either make stuff up about the Restore guys or attack their supporters, or just throw insults around. Let's not do this, okay? I understand that people accuse me of fence-sitting, but I'm just trying to be congenial. I'm just trying to be gentlemanly. We shouldn't be tearing apart our personal friendships or prospective alliances over football team-style political tribalism. We should be taking our own side and instead forcing political parties to do what we want. And that was the intended purpose of this piece. Now, the reason I'm talking about this, because I put this tweet out and I thought nothing of it, put it in my pocket, went on some meetings, and then I opened my phone and someone in Reform actually told me I've been making the headlines today because Guido Fawkes seized on this. They seized on my previous post criticising Rupert Lowe's endorsement of multiculturalism so long as they integrate. Top tip, avoid any conversations about integration or multiculturalism in a positive light. They haven't happened, they weren't wanted, they won't work, and a country is more than just a bunch of people from all over the place with completely different beliefs, so long as they abide by the law and pay taxes. Like, there's a little bit more to a country than not killing each other and not stealing from the government. So, I mentioned that, and then suddenly Guido Fawkes and the Spectator, Steer Pike, which I think is ran by James Heal, who I did reply to his tweet saying, while you're at it, while you're looking at my tweets, can you tell your boss to put out the footage, please? And by that, I mean Freddie Sayers, who hermetically sealed my debate with Gove. The Spectator think that suddenly my tweets are worth reporting on as if they're like national political news. And the Daily Mail as well. They decided to report on that post and my very long post quoting, "If Restore amounts to nothing more than a pressure campaign, then it served its purpose." They wrote 2 articles on it, in fact. It was Christian Calgi that did both of these. I do find it conspicuous that suddenly these outlets think I have something really, really important to say when I offer some constructive criticisms of Restore, and quote posts that also have constructive criticisms of Reform, but decide not to quote those criticisms, because they want to create the impression there's some sort of civil war or divisions within the party and that I'm somehow some partisan actor. I'm not, actually. I encourage my friends in both political parties to do things that will ensure that this country is a peaceful and prosperous place for me to raise my daughters in, and hopefully a son eventually. Nevertheless, I thought I'd respond to these because these are great examples of how the press is not designed to inform you. It's designed to manipulate you. It's designed to destroy its perceived political enemies. And so, I guess I can take consolation in the fact that I'm taking flack because I'm over the target. But they started coming for me. And I wouldn't be shocked if I eventually get demonetized, banned from various platforms, and the whole cycle of 2016 to 2024 era censorship starts up again. So, under those circumstances, I appreciate your support. I appreciate all of you who frequently tell me that I have something valuable to say, including people in the upper echelons of respective political parties like Reform and Restore, who see my criticism as constructive and from a place of critical friendship. I am going to keep doing what I'm doing, and if people whose agenda lies outside securing the peace and prosperity of my country for my children are annoyed by that, good.